thank you all for joining us today. We so appreciate you being here. We are absolutely thrilled to kick off and welcome you to the 7th Annual Brookstone Conference, which is a half-day exclusively focused on advancing youth psychiatric care. Please give a round of applause to yourself for making it here and for the exciting agenda that we are about to have. We are going to start off with an attitude of gratitude and expression for all the many people that helped to make this conference possible. First, I want to thank my partner in action, Dennis Lee. It has been such a joy co-hosting this event with you. I also want to note that throughout our agenda today, you will be seeing lots of themes of Chicago famous bridges. And we are starting the day with that bridge really not being passable. And as the day goes on, we hope that we will be covering themes that allow us to actually bridge that gap and really be advancing the science of implementation. So to begin, sorry, we're having some Zoom issues. I want to do a number of thank yous. First, I want to thank the chair of the Department of Psychiatry, Dr. Sachin Patel, if you could wave. This conference would not be possible without him. He has really stewarded and shepherded this conference forward the last couple of years, and it was he and our vice chair, Dr. Teplin, who I believe texted me. She's in an Uber crisis, but is on her way, and she's a colleague and a mentor of mine personally, also someone that does a lot of implementation research, but it was really the two of them that said they thought it would be of interest to our Northwestern community to really think about implementation science as a way to advance child mental health. So we're extremely grateful to Sachin and Linda. We have learned so much from Sarah T. Can you wave if you're here? She's been our partner at Northwestern Medicine, helping us because this is a donor-funded conference, and she has been just an absolute wealth of information and resources, no pun intended. I also want to thank a number of folks from the Department of Psychiatry. Alexander White made the save the date and helped us to disseminate information about this conference. Beth helped us to reserve the space. Hera and Michael Malcolm, who did not send me a picture, so he is not pictured, were the ones that helped us to get everything set up and paid for, and Sue Shankman really helped us as the host of last year's conference. So thank you very much, Stu. If you're there, I can't see you, but thank you so much, Stu. And then I really have to thank the three women on the bottom. Emma, could you wave to the group? So every little detail here was the brainchild of Emma Little and Jordan Viernes. Every little thing you'll see throughout the day, their attention to detail, their creativity really just made this event into what it is today. So we're extremely grateful to them. And Kira Di Clemente is helping us to manage the virtual offering and also created many of our beautiful visuals. She created the agenda and the conference announcements. So we're extremely grateful to her. She'll also be closing the conference today. And then we're so grateful to all of the speakers, posters, presenters, partners such as the MSS Division of Implementation Science, New Cats, and others who helped promote the conference, and also all of the CEDIS staff that are here today providing logistical support. I also want to share our heartfelt thank you to the Brookstone family. This family was a gift to Northwestern Medicine from Adrian and Arnold Brookstone, pictured beautifully there on your screen. It was their generosity in loving memory of their son Gordy that made this conference possible. They aspired to provide a free opportunity for providers, advocates, and community members to connect and engage with leading experts guiding the future of youth mental health programs and treatments. And as we're celebrating the 7th conference, because this was started over 7 years ago in partnership with the former chair, John Cerneski, we remember Adrian and Arnie and share our gratitude with their daughter, Susan Meerbach, who has been our partner. We sadly lost Arnie in February of this year and Adrian in 2023. So this is our first conference without either of them in attendance, and we're just so grateful to their family. We also appreciate their many family and friends who have attended and supported this event over the years, including their niece, who I just met in the lobby, Sharon, who is here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, so some quick conference logistics. So if you are a friend on Zoom, we want to Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us, but also let you know that this won't be a Zoom interactive experience. This will really be a Zoom viewing experience. So you will have limited opportunity to chat or engage. So if something inspires you, please feel free to email cetus@northwestern.edu, and we will connect you with one of the speakers. We do have one break, so we started a little bit late. We'll make up for that at the break. There will be refreshments outside. If you need additional breaks, feel free to come up and go. We do ask, if at all possible, that you try to wait until in between speakers. That is our vice chair that I just publicly thanked, Linda Teplin. Thank you thank you so much for being here. Of course it is Uber's fault. And we are very excited also. We hope you'll stay from 5 to 6. We have a poster session, and we actually have 3 poster awards. There are 22 entries, and you'll all get to vote live for who you think should win the award. So instructions about that will be forthcoming from Dr. Kelly Scott, who'll be our officiant that section. And there are a wealth of materials in the beautiful purple folders that are in front of you. So if you have any throughout the day, if you'd like to learn more about the speakers, the program, or our local offerings, please check that. We have 3 major goals today. The first is we want to share our enthusiasm with you all and provoke your curiosity about how implementation science can improve mental health research, practice, and advocacy. If we do our job right today, you will want to learn more after this conference, and this will be the start of a conversation. We also want this conference to be celebratory. It's a really tough time to live in Chicago. There's a lot going on. We think morale is low. It's a tough time to work at Northwestern. So we think it's really important to take a moment and celebrate the incredible work that happens in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences and also across Northwestern medicine. We're especially excited to celebrate the work at the nexus of youth behavioral health and implementation research, and we'll be highlighting folks that do work right at that nexus throughout the day today. And then, of course, we really want to honor the legacy of the Brookstone family, as they're truly philanthropists within Northwestern and globally, and we really want to honor their vision for this conference to improve youth behavioral health care. All right, so our premise today, this is a visual that our center developed, our Center for Dissemination and Implementation Science, is that the youth behavioral health field is plagued by gaps. You saw in my opening slide that bridge to nowhere because the drawbridge was up. And we have an enormous gap between what we know in terms of our best public health and medical knowledge about how to improve youth behavioral health and what we actually do. And we believe that that is because there are multiple gaps that impede progress, all of which we'll be covering today. First, there isn't enough supply of effective treatments when we need them for youth. When effective treatments exist, youth often can't access them. We also don't always know scientifically the best way to get treatments to families, and we don't always have enough people with the expertise to actually bridge this gap from research to practice. So we often say implementation science can help us to bridge this gap, and that we must do so with an intention and a relentless focus on equity. And so to briefly note some of the gaps you'll hear us talk about today is first this idea that we don't have enough effective youth mental health treatment, or that there isn't enough supply of youth mental health treatment. There are some headlines here showing that globally youth mental health is a major issue and that we've often referred to a youth mental health crisis. There was just literally that AHRQ article is from last month, an AHRQ report about evidence gaps in youth mental health. And there's a really shocking and often cited statistic that it takes 17 years to turn only 14% of research to the benefit of patients. So in short, there's not enough supply of effective treatments for youth. When treatments exist, not enough youth receive them. So here are some of the latest statistics. For every 10 children or adolescents or young adults with a major depressive diagnosis, only 6 will receive any care at all. With anxiety disorders, the number's even lower, only 3 out of 10, and for substance use disorders, only 2 out of 10. So even when treatments do exist, we need to improve access to them. And of course, when youth are living in poverty or have lower access to education or from historically disadvantaged groups, these gaps are even more pronounced. And then also, we as a society don't tend to invest in improving access to behavioral health care. So on the left is the former leader of the National Institute of Mental Health, who upon his retirement was reflecting that he wished he had invested more in behavioral health treatments and in getting treatments out to the families that needed them. And on the right is a visual of funding from the National Institute on Drug Abuse over a 5-year period where there was historic investment in curbing the opioid epidemic. And what they found was only 2% of all research went to actually get treatment out into practice, what we would call implementation research. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dennis to really help you to make the most of this meeting, hear some of the key terms that we'll be using throughout the day, and really help to orient you. Thank you so much for being here, Dennis.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Sarah. Let me adjust some technical things here. Sorry, we have some Zoom challenges, as always. All right, so thank you all, and thank you for that wonderful introduction, Sarah. Again, my name is Dennis Lee, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. And like Sarah, I'm very delighted that all of you have joined us today for an afternoon of celebration and learning about youth mental health and how we can implement interventions better. And again, thank you to the Brookstone family for making this event possible. Now, it is my pleasure and my responsibility over the next few minutes to provide you all with a bit of a primer about implementation science, which is the theme of this year's conference. We reckon that most folks in the room may have only had a cursory exposure to implementation science. So our goal here is not to teach you the entire field within 5 minutes, but it is really to give you some shared concepts and terminology that will enable you to engage with more deeply with the speakers and the presentations that we have later this afternoon. Okay. All right. So I want to start by describing what the problem is that implementation science is trying to solve. Sarah already previewed some 4 gaps that really get in the way of translating what we know into what we do. And to rephrase that more colloquially, once we, meaning the researchers and the academic medical centers and the people who generate scientific evidence, once we know what to do, there's still the challenge of convincing and helping other people to do the thing and to do it correctly. There's a great historic example that we like to go back to around this that you might have already guessed from this image. People might be familiar with scurvy, which is a disease easily preventable by vitamin C, now that we know that. But back in the 1600s, by the 1600s, some medical textbooks had already recommended using juice from lemons and limes to treat scurvy. So that we can say that by the 1600s, there were already some people who knew what to do. However, it wasn't until the mid-1700s that physicians were widespreadly accepting of citrus juice as the best treatment over other modalities and other home remedies. And yet, even in that implementation, many of them wanted to clean the juice, so they ended up boiling it, inadvertently destroying the vitamin C that was actually going to help scurvy. As a result, people continued to die of scurvy until the early 1800s, nearly 200 years after we knew what works. And it wasn't until 200 years later when the knowledge of not boiling the juice became widely accepted. So in a sense, then, at its core, implementation science is in the business of convincing and helping others to do something and to do it correctly, to move them across that bridge. And I think the data that Sarah presented about the gaps in youth mental health speak for themselves, but I also want to highlight just how much of an effect on public health good or bad implementation can have. So through traditional research, let's hypothetically say we've identified an intervention that is 100% effective when delivered in a hyper-controlled laboratory setting. I just recently collaborated on a grant related to ADHD, so I'm going to use multimodal treatment for ADHD as my example. Gold standard treatment for ADHD, hopefully I'm not butchering this. Gold standard treatment for ADHD in young people is a combination of medication, therapy, and school-based modifications. And in a perfect world, with perfect implementation, we would have 100% of youth who are diagnosed with ADHD, they would get their treatment and receive the benefits, including managed disorder and reduced symptoms and impairment. Now, we know the world is not perfect, and in the real world, we have delivery systems that are very complex, and that creates bottlenecks and slowdowns. There's lots of layers and lots of players in the game. So what gets in the way of the 100% impact? Imagine that only 50% of the agencies or the clinics that can deliver multimodal treatment choose to offer it at all. And within those 50% of agencies, 50% of the providers actually learn the protocol to do this properly. 50% of those providers offer it, make the actual offer to their patients. 50% of those patients end up kind of uptaking and using the treatments. And then 50% of the agencies or the patients continue to offer and use it over time. So what that quickly adds up to is when you multiply by 50% all the way down, you end up with only a 3% population impact. So there's very precipitous drop-offs when you think about how implementation in the real world can go well or cannot go well. Where implementation science comes in is it's a field of inquiry that asks these questions. What is not currently happening? For whom is it not currently happening? Why is it not happening? How do we make it happen for all people? And then how do we know it's happening and will continue to happen over time? So implementation science is the method by which we can help cross this bridge between what we know and what we do. So studying implementation, like many of us in the room who might be trained to study effectiveness of interventions or maybe are more familiar with effectiveness research, studying implementation really requires a shift in our focus. A good colleague of ours likes to use the example of your phone camera. So sometimes in portrait mode is like effectiveness research. The focus is really on what is right in front of you and everything else in the back is blurry. So in effectiveness research, we are focused on trying to test if this intervention actually improves people's health status. And everything in the back, the delivery system, all the clinicians, the providers that are delivering stuff, that is controlled and that is unmeasured. Implementation research, on the other hand, is like the landscape mode. So suddenly the front of your camera becomes blurry, and you are really interested in all of the mountains and the rivers and the beautiful trees in the background. And that's what we're focusing on in implementation research. We want to look at the delivery system, assuming that the intervention works, and evaluate how to change the system to improve the quantity and quality of that delivery. So, this is my last slide. I'll walk you through, finally, the kind of building blocks of what implementation science is built on. All of implementation science starts with a thing that you want to put into place, an intervention, a program, a practice, a pill, or policy. We like to generalize it and use a very scientific term called the thing. It just makes things a little bit easier. So let's assume we have a thing, which is like maybe a new medication treatment for psychosis. The next building block in implementation science is determinants, or also known as barriers and facilitators. So what implementation scientists want to do here is think about what are all of the problems, the challenges, the barriers that get in the way of delivering the thing to the people who need the thing. So that's the first line of inquiry in implementation science. Once you know what the barriers are, you can then start developing strategies. These are actions that you take to address all of those barriers. If you don't have funding, maybe find some more funding. If you people don't know what to do or are not trained on the protocol, maybe we train them better on the protocol. So you match these strategies, these actions to the barriers that are in your specific context. And so implementation scientists spend time developing these strategies that are specific to the thing and the determinants. And then finally, we measure our changes or improvements in the system, in the delivery of our thing, through implementation outcomes at a whole host of levels, at the individual provider level, at the patient level, at the clinic level, and at the system level. What you'll hear in the talks moving forward is all of our research projects will be talking about their incredible findings kind of using these buckets. They might describe their thing, they might describe the determinants, the barriers that they're encountering, they'll talk about the strategies that they're using, and they might talk about how the implementation outcomes have changed over time. Now it is my distinct pleasure, I think I don't have a slide in here, yep. Now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our plenary speaker for today, Dr. Julia Moore. Our team at CETUS has worked with Julia to create lots of user-friendly evidence-based practice guides as part of a center grant, and many of us have attended her training workshops. Julia is the director of the Center for Implementation based in Canada and joins us from across the border today. And we really consider her a great collaborator and friend in this work. I have a personal story of note with Julia. I first met her at the UK Implementation Science Conference, the third UK Implementation Science Conference during COVID, or right after COVID, so we were presenting virtually, and she beat me for the best poster presentation. I was runner-up, but since then, it was a clearly deserved win. It was a wonderful presentation, and we are so happy to have her here to share her incredible knowledge and experience with you today.